Hi, I'm Charmaine Brown, coming to you from Charles County Government, where I am Chief Executive Officer. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are important to growth because they drive innovation. If you are in business today, innovation is what keeps you competitive. And think about the alternative to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's same thinking, right? It's looking at the problem the same way, and it's using old, outdated techniques to solve those problems. So if you are in business today, innovation is key, and diversity, equity, and inclusion drive innovation. It helps you to compete, and it also helps you to understand that the more complicated the problem, the more complex the problem, the more critical diversity, equity, and inclusion are, bringing that rich and different way of looking at opportunities and not just problems.
Hi, I'm Luana Williams, and I serve as the Director for the Center for Student Engagement at Fort Valley State University, located in Fort Valley, Georgia. So the question that I am answering today is what I've learned this year that I didn't know before. So I think the best way that I can answer that question is actually with two quotes that really rang true for me as we were going through this pandemic. The first is, in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity, which is a quote by Albert Einstein. And the second quote for me is, it's not the strongest of species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. And that's a quote by Charles Darwin. So I think what I have learned this year that I didn't know before is the level of resilience and adaptability to change that we all have within us. When the pandemic came and ascended upon the world, all of higher ed had to make a decision about how they were going to still deliver academics and all of the other experiences that they've given to college students. We had to immediately pivot within a 4-week span to determine how we would still provide services to our students and the academic knowledge that we know that they so desperately need. What I realized was how dedicated we are to our students, how dedicated we are to the educational process. We immediately learned new skills, how to adapt in this virtual environment. For me, with the Center for Student Engagement, we had to figure out how we would remain engaged with our college students through a virtual platform. We were able to hold workshops, career development opportunities, and even community service opportunities virtually for our students to ensure that we remained engaged with them and that we were still able to give them that particular experience. So of the things that I've learned this year, definitely in the middle of difficulty, there's always an opportunity. And the ones that survive are the ones that are able to adapt to change. Have a great conference. Love you, HomeFree.
All set and ready to go. It is our pleasure to introduce our audience to 3 wonderful philanthropic leaders in the industry, not only philanthropic leaders, but just good people themselves. I want our audience to get to know all of you. I've got some questions that you have selected, and let's just kind of get going. And look, this is all quite informal, so anything that you want to throw in here, we are open to. We want our audience to learn from you. So I'm going to start with you, Janice, and tell our audience just a little bit about yourself. I want all of you to do this, and then we're going to get into our questions. A little bit about yourself, and how did you get into the position that you're in now?
Well, first of all, Marcia, I have to say, just thank you for having me. We go way back. I don't think I had braces when we met, but I might as well have. It was, I feel like it was, well, we won't tell how long it's been, but it's really great to be back with you and to join your conference. A little bit about me. So I grew up in Northeast Ohio, outside of Cleveland, in a small town called Ashtabula. And my experience growing up there was really my earliest lessons in what we now call geography of opportunity. And of course, I didn't have that fancy word growing up. I understood it more as the kids I went to high school with were more likely to drop out, get pregnant, drop out of college than they were to actually kind of graduate college and go on to do something else. I think I recently saw that the opportunity score for the area that I grew up in is a C-, which is not the worst possible place. But now I live in Tacoma Park, Maryland, where my neighborhood has an A. And we all know and are constantly reminded that our zip codes have an inordinate contribution to our life outcomes. That was my experience growing up as a mixed kid in a very white place. And I see my own story as an example of what is possible, but not yet systemic. And my entire career to this point really has been about how do we fully realize that dream that tells us that it doesn't matter the circumstances of our birth. We want every child to have an opportunity to reach their full economic potential. I started out working in housing and community development in Cleveland's East Side. I then moved to DC and did policy work at Unidos US, formerly known as National Council La Raza, for 10 years, which is where we got to know each other. And I worked closely with Unidos's housing counseling affiliates. And then for the last 7 years, I've been at the Jpmorgan Chase Foundation, really trying to put dollars into practice against a lot of the things that I had worked so hard and advocated for when I was on the sort of the civil rights side. And so that continues to be my driving passion and the I guess the ethos that I bring to this job.
Well, Janis, you were humble and fantastic and such a community leader then, you are now, and especially now you can do bigger and better things. So it's a pleasure. Look, guys, I had to hunt Janis down. We haven't seen each other probably for 10 years, but I knew I wanted her to be on this panel. So we connected and it's been great. I thank you so much, Janis.
Thank you.
Allow me to introduce you all to Nate Hurst. Now, Nate is our new leader at the Wells Fargo Foundation. Nate has been there, since June, Nate?
June, yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. So, look, everybody will know not only you, but we're going to get into what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. So I was brought up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So that's where I was born, and I lived there for the first 12 years of my life. My mom was a nurse of all sorts, home nurse, worked burn units, children's units, just about everything under the sun, and worked all shifts. And my dad was a social worker. And for us, we grew up, lower middle class. So our vacations were camping and like going out in the woods. So all of that, I say all that because it created this ethos and this value system in me, one, to give back and to understand the importance of helping, your fellow man and woman. And the other is that, nature is a beautiful thing, and we have to take care of it, and we can't take it for granted. And you can learn a lot, out in nature. So that sort of stuck with me. I grew up, I was the minority on my street, predominantly Black, African-American. And I, as a young kid, I didn't see color. It was a beautiful thing. And it's, something that stuck with me. And to be honest, moving to Northern Virginia when I was in my teens, and, that's a tough time to move as it is, it was a shock to me to come to Virginia in the South and sort of see some of that racial divide and some of those issues be in the forefront. I was in a DC suburb that was predominantly white, a lot of military families, and it was very hard for me, a very hard adjustment, both in that time of my life, but just to see those systemic issues really play out. I was fortunate enough to meet Thurgood Marshall Jr., working a summer job. He was a hero of mine in undergrad. I was all kind of pre-law, and I wasn't shy. I went up and I said, gosh, this can't be a coincidence. He has to be related. We struck up a conversation, and, after some hard work, I ended up interning in Gore's office in the Clinton administration, and worked President Clinton's second term doing environmental policy. So really, that I worked in the environmental space for quite some time. And where we really got things done was, working with organizations like yours, bringing together sort of nonprofit, public, private sector, all of which have strengths and weaknesses. But when you brought those three together and harnessed their resources and ideas, that's where real progress was made. And so I said, I want to do that for a living. I don't know what that's called. But I realized, there wasn't any advanced degree that back then in early 2000 that, necessarily had it. So I applied to schools that had strong public policy and business programs. I ended up at Cal Berkeley, which was a little progressive in the thinking, particularly in the business school, with the Center for Responsible Business, and really studied, what is now kind of known as sustainability, CSR, or now evolving into social impact. And I've been in the private sector ever since. So, it's great to be at Wells. This is what I would call sort of the third big corporate turnaround journey I'm on. I was at Walmart in the early days, where we leaned into sustainability and diversity inclusion and really changed that company. And by doing the right thing and using the size for good, returned Walmart to growth and growing in a meaningful way. And so I was there during some of those dramatic change years, with the foundation as well, getting, the Walmart Foundation focused on issues like hunger that were really important to their customer base. And then went to HP, which I had done some work in grad school with them. Went back there, knowing that they just had tremendous people who were focused on this issue for some time. But we're really, on a business side in a tough spot. When I left there, we had $1 billion in new revenue tied to sustainability, CSR, human rights issues, diversity, inclusion issues, meaning our customers really looked at our record, and the fact that we were doing that differentiated us from other technology brands, and they were making purchases based on, our social impact record, our environmental record, and what we were doing. And so I'm now bringing that experience to Wells Fargo, which is a tremendous company. I love my team. My team is incredibly diverse. So I feel very blessed, particularly in this time, this critical time in our country's history, where I have a third of my team that is diverse. And I've spent the last, 3 or 4 months just listening and learning from them. I think I've maybe had more growth in myself as a person and as a leader, in this short time here, than maybe any other part of my career. And so it's been a pleasure to see you, to get to know you and so many other partners. And I'm excited about our journey ahead together.
It's going to be a journey. We are so happy to have you, Nate, and thank you so much. Let me go on over here to Lynette. Lynette is the newly appointed head of the Truist Foundation. Lynette, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you were at SunTrust for many years doing big things over there, and now you're doing even bigger things at the Truist Foundation. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Marcia, thank you so much for this opportunity. Excited to be on this panel with such an esteemed group of leaders. I have been, I'm a native Floridian, and I went to Florida State. And after graduating, so I'll be the dinosaur in the room, the veteran in the room. I've been at the same firm my entire career. And so I've done a myriad of things at the bank, but most recently, prior to getting the opportunity to serve as a informed and servant leader in the foundation and leading that work, I was the community reinvestment officer for the entire SunTrust franchise. And so my job was more regulatory focused, making sure that the bank had that public-private partnership with nonprofits and NGOs, and that we as a partner ensure that we loan money in the communities that were underserved and underrepresented, that we made right investments from an equity standpoint to build economic development and mobility and provide that stabilization in underserved communities, and make sure that we also listen to communities and provided our expertise as leaders in the marketplace. And so I would say I've been passionate about my work for a number of years because I really believed in what I was doing, that we have to ensure that communities grow and thrive. And so at Truist, when SunTrust started to merge with BB&T and the merger closed in December of 2019, I got the great opportunity to join our foundation to lead it as its president. And I will say this is probably, out of my long and rich history at the bank, this has been the most fun I've had creating and developing, knowing that we're making informed decisions on where to place investments that would have an impact on lives, helping people to be inspirational as they support organizations, support communities, support children, support young people and seniors. And so this has been the most fun I've had at the bank, and I love what I do today. And so part of my passion is equity and justice. I mean, that's been part of what I've done all of my 30-year career at the bank. And so making sure that we represent all factions equally. And so I've been really proud of that. And so when the pandemic hit this first year, we stood this foundation up, and literally 16 days later, the pandemic happened. And so we recalibrated and it started this huge investment to provide basic needs and basic care. And so I got to create and develop that. And so to be able to put that flag in the ground for this new entity called Truist Foundation to help support families that were struggling, first responders, that was important to me. And that was important that we make those investments of $50 million to support people during the pandemic and support organizations. So really proud of that. As I said, I am a native Floridian. I am a big sister to 3 brothers. And my team at Truist is very diverse as well. I have an all-woman team making big things happen for us in the foundation with investments. And a third of that team are women of color. And so you can imagine how passionate and controlled and fractious our conversations are as we try to make sure we're making the great investments in an informed and data-driven way to help communities thrive and grow. Because, at Truist, we're a purpose-built institution and purpose and mission-driven, and we want to inspire and build better lives and communities. And we adopt that at every meeting. We start our meetings out with a quote on why do we do this work. And so I'm so proud of these women that are doing a huge lift to make a difference in the community.
Well, that is quite unique. You have an all-female staff.
Right.
Okay. That should be good. I'm going to go back to you, Nate. And this is a question I would like to ask of each of you. In light of our social sort of reawakening, if you will, from a philanthropic standpoint, what are you doing that's new? And I would like for all of you to answer this, that's new, that's innovative, and that might fuse some of the economic and social inequality issues that we are experiencing today. Nate.
Yeah, thank you. So several things we're doing new. One, I have forced my team to look through the racial equity lens in all our work. So in our foundation, we've had housing affordability, small business growth, financial health, and I've also added sustainability, environmental justice as as a new pillar to some of our focus areas in the foundation. And through any of that grant making, I'm asking my team and my leaders to look at racial equity. I mean, the thing that COVID-19 is done, which we all know, is it's only accelerated the gap between, you know, the haves and have-nots, and deepened the racial wealth gap that exists in America. And I've been able to get the bank to really, you know, embrace the fact, the systemic issues that financial services has played, you know, in driving that gap over the years, and really shifting not just some of our foundational focus, but as well in the lines of business, having really, you know, tough, hard conversations, but changes underway. You know, you can feel it happening throughout the different levels of the organization, throughout the lines of business, and with our new leadership, and a lot of our new leadership coming in, and a lot of diverse leadership coming in, as well as promoting from within, which I've had an opportunity to do on my team already, bringing those diverse mindsets. As that video said, I believe this coming in to financial services, and that DEI is the only way to innovate. And if you're not innovating, you're not going to survive as a business. And so one of the other things we've done from an innovation standpoint is we're really focused on how do we reach and get those good ideas of things that are working out there in the community, and as a financial services institution, really help bring them to scale so they can have greater impact. So we created the Housing Affordability Breakthrough Challenge, which was a new thing that we tried this year, and, you know, ran over the summer into September. And we had tremendous ideas from you know, all over the country. We think this is something that, you know, we're going to want to replicate and expand upon. These are ideas that maybe didn't have like venture capital funding, but they're great ideas that need visibility and sort of that initial inertia and boost. So we're looking at, you know, finding new ways to partner and utilize organizations like yourself, Marcia, in terms of reaching, you know, some of the historically Black college and university systems, and building, you know, those leaders and getting them into our pipeline and growing their careers, you know, at Wells. That's something we're very interested in. And I think we'll be looking at new ideas, and I'm excited some of the other leaders you have here on the call, ways we can collaborate together, because I think us in financial services working as individual entities isn't going to work anymore. I mean, these challenges that exist out there in these communities are going to take all of us working together and tackling it in consistent ways.
Absolutely, absolutely. Great thoughts, Nate. Now I'm going to change this question around just a little bit. And I'm going to go to you, Lynette, and then I'm going to go to Janice. What is the Truist Foundation doing to, you know, that you would consider to be quite innovative, little bit different, something that you're really proud of?
Yeah, thank you, Marcia. The one thing I would say, as we try to address the pandemic and then the whole issue around racial and social justice, you know, as a financial institution, you know, part of our job is to make sure that the communities have the investment dollars and loan dollars they need. And one of the things that we did this year, as we were intentional about our dialogue around social and racial equities, we provided $40 million in support of creating a new community capital entity called Corner Square. And this new national nonprofit will help us fund community development financial institutions, which, you know, are supported and sponsored by the U.S. Department of Treasury, that are mission driven. But we're supporting those CDFIs with Corner Square for micro and small businesses. And 100% of that funding that will be provided through Corner Square, through those CDFIs, will be allocated to help racially and ethnically diverse small business owners, women and minority owned, particularly in low and moderate income communities, utilize that funding to create participation so they could free up capital to invest more and ensure that small businesses continue, one, to survive this pandemic and thrive. You know, we were doing some research as the pandemic was raging and still going, that 53% of small businesses were in jeopardy of not reopening. And so this was our answer to address not only the racial and social equity piece, but also to address how do we support small businesses, which is the cornerstone of this country, making sure that businesses stay open, they can still pay their employees and get the capital needed through the CDFIs to support that. And we know CDFIs do a great level of work in investing in communities and our mission base. And so we thought this was really strong to create a new entity that could support those CDFIs in that way. So that was really innovative for Truist Financial.
Great. Janice, well, look,
And
Jamie
Truist
Dimon is a change agent for sure. So talk to us about your work at the Jpmorgan Chase Foundation, and particularly a program that you are very, very proud of there.
Yeah, it sounds like, Lynette, you refer to yourself as the veteran on the panel, but I think I have more time in the foundation. So there's like so much that I'm proud of. And I think there's also a journey that we've been on, that both through this panel, as well as I'd say to both Lynette and Nate, as you guys are getting started and sort of ramping up your foundation efforts, I'd be happy to talk more about. Let me say a couple things in response to your question. First I'll say that back in 2017, we took all of our grant makers through racial equity training. We thought that this was just core professional development. If we say that this is what we're about, then we need to make sure that our team has a common understanding of our history, of what structural racism is. We have a diverse team, lots of people who care about this, but maybe hadn't worked on it directly. They bring their lived experience with them, but they are also now for the first time in a position to square off with market leaders and try to explain to them why these investments are the right ones for the market. So we did that. And then we built a body of work that really centered around addressing the racial wealth divide in the US. Our reflection this year, I think the circumstances of 2020, which we all know so well, really required us all to hold up a mirror and ask, what more can we be doing, and not be satisfied with anything that we had done up until this point. And so in doing that, our self-assessment is that while we had a lot of equity themed activities, there was more that we could do to really center equity within our work, to have a statement that anchors, a set of we believes that follow on, that guide our work, and really codify and institutionalize that so it lives beyond any one person. So that's one thing that I'll say we did. We took that step this year to do that. I'll hit some of the non-sexy things first, because I think they matter a lot for your audience that's on the phone. We, in the wake of COVID and in our response, in addition to trying to hit the humanitarian need, supporting frontline workers, we also did a scrub on our process. And in the wake of George Floyd, yet another scrub on our process, recognizing the power imbalance between philanthropy and groups on the ground just trying to keep it together and meet the emergency needs of their communities. So we reduced the number of questions in our application, create a streamlined application process, parallel processed checks, so that the moment that a grant was signed, money was in the bank. And we just tried to cut out a lot of red tape so that we could move as quickly as possible. We had an intentional focus on diverse leaders. Those are some of the things. We then also have started doing a scrub on our own data, and we'll be collecting additional demographic information beyond what we've already been collecting. Let me just pause and say that while I think that's really important to do, we also recognize that collecting more data is really challenging for nonprofits, and we're still trying to get that right. Like, how do we understand where dollars are going? Who's leading those organizations? What are their board makeup? And what's the right balance of information we need? So we're still thinking through that. So let me describe one thing that we did this summer that I think was really out of the box for us. we invested in a pilot program on racial healing for frontline workers in the workforce and education fields. And I don't know that racial healing is a topic or a phrase that you hear in corporate spaces. But I think it's very appropriate that we're all talking about that after the events of this year in particular. The theory behind the grant and the pilot is that a number of the organizations that we are supporting, they are themselves being traumatized and experiencing trauma, while also trying to go out and serve communities who are experiencing, living and breathing trauma. And so in order to position them to be their best selves, we have to take care of the practitioners, everybody on this call, right? Like, I'm
That's
sure, right? We're all experiencing this. And so it's like you're in a caregiving job, most of you. I can't see all of you on the webinar, but I know what housing counselors do. I know what direct service agencies do. I've been there. I did that job. You're caring for your community day in and day out while you're processing your own trauma. And so this grant was building off of some other work that we've done around community development, trauma-informed community development. We really wanted to focus on those frontline practitioners, make sure they were getting the healing that they needed so that they could turn around and incorporate healing practices in the work that they were doing. In this case, with workers who had lost jobs and they were trying to reposition for their next career. So it's in its pilot phase right now. It's really out of the box for us, but I'm incredibly inspired by it, and I'm excited to see what we learn from it and whether it's something we can scale.
Okay. Excellent comments. You all know that all of our nonprofit leaders, I mean, they are taking notes because they need you. They need to hear what they should or should not do. Nate, let me just ask you a question. And this is not one of the questions that we talked about. And guys, any of you that want to answer anything or say something else, please, no problem. Nate, you've been in the foundation arena for many years. If there were three things that these nonprofits, when we apply to your foundation, that you're looking for, or either that they should not do, that too many are doing to maybe strengthen their applications, are there some things that you really look for that you think are important that our proposal writers and others need to really focus attention on?
Yeah, great question. I think first and foremost, what are the outcomes that you as an organization are focused on, and sort of, to do your homework and see where we may have done some public goals, or put some impact metrics around things we're trying to achieve. I mean, inside the walls at a bank or any of these big corporations, we're under pressure to get more focused, to not, be all things to all people, to show how our work complements other parts of the business, meaning, it's issues that make sense to maybe the core customers on the business. So, no surprise. I mean, I think everyone here has some focus on affordable housing or financial health and helping people understand better how to get access to capital and credit. So to me, the outcomes piece is really important. And the more clear you are and able to define that up front, I think is really important. And, look at how you can hook that into bigger things that foundation is doing, whether it's a family foundation or a corporate foundation, I think is really important. I think the other thing is in our field inside a corporation, the reality is, even though we're a foundation, we are still, bank employees or employees, of that business. And we understand and, know where our customers' needs are. And a lot of times you are our customers. So how we can match up meeting the needs of our customers, I think is a really important component, because to me, the real sweet spot in terms of creating and maximizing resources, both for you as an organization and for us, is, utilizing philanthropic dollars plus real business dollars, so things that we're doing on the business side that is helping some of the same populations you're trying to make an impact in, and our people, our employee base. I mean, Wells has, over 250,000 employees, most of which are in the US in these communities, and they want to give back too. So that to me is the right equation to be thinking about, is how do we, as I approach Wells Fargo Foundation, how can I maximize impact and think about utilizing their employees, their expertise, their pro bono skills, as well as their foundation dollars, as well as the business interest and dollars that may exist on the business side to help create that impact.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
Marcia, could I weigh in on that as well?
Please, please.
Yeah, Nate, I really agree with everything you said, and I would go even a little step further, and it's really challenging to be doing social change work in a place that measures earnings quarterly.
Mm-hmm.
So as I've been doing this for a while, right, and we make a really exciting grant, and 2 months go by, and everybody's like, "What are the outcomes? What has changed?" Right? And you're like, "Oh no, it doesn't. It just really doesn't work quite like that." So I think understanding that that's your partners in the financial industry, like that's what we're responding to internally. But I do think there are a few things that that nonprofits can do without contorting themselves into pretzels. And the first is, my advice to nonprofits is always to stick to your core competencies, because the moment you try to sell and stretch into a different thing, whether it's for any of our foundations or another, you're just going to get overextended, and you may actually burn a bridge on a relationship. The next thing I would do in particular for financial institutions is really try to get to know the program officer that's working in the market and understand the local strategy, because like Nate, we have 4 key investment areas: small business, workforce development or jobs and skills, housing, and financial health. But really, like, where the magic happens is where those strategies drop down in place. And we have a mantra internally when we were working on our partnership with the city of Detroit. It was no New York solutions to Detroit problems. We really try to build into what we do deep community listening. So the way that we're implementing in Detroit will look really different than the way we're implementing in Miami, which will look really different than how it's happening in Dallas or LA and so on. And so the understanding what the local program officer is going for is going to be really helpful. And then just like one other thing that I think is important here, at least for us, is we're really thinking about how we can disrupt systems, try new things, maybe that have a potential to scale, but are generally like solving bigger problems that are at the community level. And we want to see, even when it's a direct service provider that maybe has a smaller scale because you're serving like this little corner of the neighborhood that's really high need, but how does it plug into a bigger picture and a bigger story in that at the local level? That's why I mentioned I think the local program officers are so important, because they can give you that, like, here's what I'm trying to solve for in Miami, which again could look, I'm picking on Miami today for no reason. But I think that will help you all as you know, if you just do the homework on the website, you're like, oh yeah, I do housing. but then, you know, when you dig down to the local level, you find like, oh, okay, housing's a lot of things. Here's what it is in Dallas. And that might be really beneficial as you're crafting your applications.
Janice, I want to jump in on one thing you said, which I think is really important. And you said it in your onset of comments, is all corporate brands are leaning into purpose, right? They're finding what is the purpose, is something that's more meaningful. The leaders that get it, they want their impact not just to be, you know, managing profit quarterly, but more long-term, you know, for their kids, their grandparents, like, I'm in a leadership position with a lot of capital. How am I changing the world, right? Or the communities where our customers live. And one thing that you can help us do, because it'll help us get more funding and generate larger programs and scale them, is to capture that story, that local impact story, that we can then go and tell inside our walls and bring, you know, executives, businesses, our employees. They want to feel it. And, you know, the challenge is if you just give out a grant, it's a big dollar amount. You know, we have $1 billion commitment to affordable housing as an example, right, by 2025. And we're giving a lot of grants, but those are just numbers. Like what execs want to hear, particularly our people want to hear at all levels of the company are, what are those dollars doing? Like, tell me the real story on how that has changed, you know, a family's life, a group of people, a person's life. And so as you're thinking about applying, you know, start at the onset to think about, you know, if we receive this funding and we're creating the impact, you know, how can I become a better storyteller and share that story with our funders? Because to me, that is a multiplier effect. I mean, Janice, I don't know if you feel the same way, but, you know, you take those stories inside and you can run with it. And, you know, Lynette, I know you want to jump in, so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I
I think Nate and Janice have summed it up really well, and they are correct on all points. I'm high-fiving them over here. But one of the things that I think that they said, both Janice talked about strategic planning, sticking to your strategic plan as you apply for funding, looking at everybody's pillars of what the foundation supports, but sticking to your strategic plan as a nonprofit is key to driving the outcomes you want to see that are long-term. And I think, you know, Nate talked about metrics and what internally, you know, purpose-driven companies are looking for today. And we're not just looking for vanity metrics, like you want to feel good about the money we invest and we want to feel good about the output, but we're really looking for those envy metrics that says, where's that deep storytelling that Nate's talking about that talks about this long-term impact to a family or to a community? Where's the knowledge that's going to bring thought leadership to a possible policy? You know, Janice, you know, I've been looking at JP for a while. You're advancing cities. I'm like, wow, that is fantastic. But you're advancing and deepening knowledge so that we can create thought leadership and policy. And so that's what a corporate foundations look to support when we look at nonprofit organizations and NGOs, that we want those enviable metrics that people are going to say, wow, look at the difference they're making in that community. And oh, by the way, they've now replicated that 5 times so that we can see a big umbrella of change happening across the country.
Well, look, guys, these nonprofits can provide all the stories that you need. I mean, there's no question about it. Now, talk to me just for a minute now that we've gotten on this subject. I mean, how do you all want those stories? I mean, should they just sort of come in sporadically? Is there a person there? I mean, does it go to your marketing department? How does that go? And I'll start with you, Nate.
Yeah, well, part of it I'm still figuring out. You know, we're going through a big organizational transformation, but we now have within public affairs. So, you know, Bill Daly's group, which you know, we have brand marketing and communications coming together. So that'll be helpful on our side. I would say, look, I think at this stage for us, like share the raw stories. Like, you know, we can work through them and work with them together. I do think that Janice's point, like getting to know your community leader will be helpful because they know that community. They can meet some of the people impacted. They can understand the story and how it complements work that we're trying to do to deliver for our customers, you know, and that community at the local level. So I think that's one mean. I mean, as a leader of the foundation, I want to know and learn these, just looking at a piece of paper, and I can't travel right now, of course, and I don't know when that'll return. So I want to feel this work, right? And I'm a kinetic learner. So for me, I learn inside out. If I feel it, then it helps me innovate. It helps me bring in new resources. So as far as I'm concerned, I'll be happy to share them and take the time to get to know them and read through them. I don't have any system in place yet, so I welcome others' ideas who may already have things in place.
So,
Yep.
Janice, where does one find the local leaders, the local sort of foundation leaders? This would be for all of you. Now, Lynette, I know the local ones for you, but I didn't even know that there were local foundation people for the Jpmorgan Chase Foundation.
Yep, we in most of our big footprint cities, we have a few hubs. So Chicago serves most Midwest cities except for Columbus, which has their own. We hub in Miami and Orlando that serves most of Florida. So I'd say you should be able to find this information on our website. That's the place that I would start. And if a simple Google search does not bring it up, ask Marcia. Marcia can ask me. I will beg you not for. I see we have nearly 200 people. I don't know that I can respond to 200 emails, but Marcia, I could definitely make sure that you have a list of like who our local people are, so that you can share that if it for some reason is not readily available. Can I just quickly say on the stories? So this is kind of for Nate and Lynette. I'll tell you guys, we've been through like every system on this that has resulted everything from like people using those, what are the like cameras that you like strap on your head, GoPros? Yeah, like sending GoPro videos from their events to phone camera, like doing it on your iPhone. We now have a system in place for our grantees to collect stories, and that has been quite a journey. My message to the nonprofits on the line is, this is a really important question for you to ask your funder. Your stories are your currency, and they are also your intellectual property. And so, it's one thing to include a few stories as a part of your regular report. You may be putting them out there publicly anyways as part of your blog post or your own annual report. If your funder wants something more than that, consider building it into your budget. If they want something that is actually like videotape stories, something that is a little more long form, that has more production, that takes time, and it takes your end beneficiary, your family's time. So think about how to build that into your budget, and don't feel like you have to give that away for free.
Okay, no, that's really good. And I would love to ask each one of you after today, I would love to get a list that I could distribute to other nonprofits, the people who are in your local areas. I did not know that existed across the board, and really just great information about the stories. There are hundreds of stories. We didn't think that, and I'll just sort of speak for myself, one or two stories is fine, but if the stories can build the case for impact, if the stories can build the case for what your dollars are doing in the community and help these nonprofits to strengthen their relationship with you, you got it. There's no problem with that. So we're going to move forward with that. That's some really great information. Lynette, let me ask you. You just had a round of funding. Tell me one type of proposal that you did not fund.
That's a really great question. I'll tell you the type that did not get funded. So the type that when you read the application, we were unclear on who was their target audience. It was unclear on what would be the outputs, like what's going to be the outputs just right away from this funding. And then if we couldn't see the outputs, then I could not see the mid to long-term outcomes from the funding. So when you do an application, again, be very clear when you read it to yourself, back to yourself, that have I explained who we are and what the purpose of the funds will be utilized for? And then who is going to be impacted? What's the constituency that's going to be impacted by the grant dollars? And so that's kind of what we would have turned down this time. And then, of course, for us, the other piece, because we're a new foundation, and as a result of the merger in our listening sessions we hosted last year for the merger, we created these 4 interim pillars for the Truist Foundation. If the application didn't align to one of those 4 pillars, then we also turned those down, Marcia.
Okay. Guys, look, I mean, they're handing me all kind of sheets of paper. I have so many questions for you guys, it's ridiculous. So we're gonna have to have a whole nother session individually. I mean, I must have 10 pieces of paper here with questions that are coming in to our chat. One question, of course, is this doesn't have anything to do with any of the questions that we talked about. But, you know, look, these guys, the folks that's on our line that are listening, I mean, they are working with each one of you and they want to do better. I can tell you this is something that we drive home, that, and Nate and I have talked about the business side of being a nonprofit and what we need to do to better perform. This is why we have our Reaching Millions conference, so we can get a complete understanding, certainly for my affiliates, and we've got, I consider to be the best in the whole country, 50 plus nonprofit independent organizations around the country. You know, it's about performing. It's about understanding what we need to do. It's about, you know, seeing yourself as a business. I mean, time is out waiting for government money to just come and, you know, knock on your door somewhere. We have to change. We have to reinvent ourselves. Let me ask you a couple of the questions that just come into me. So there's a vaccine that's on the horizon. Will this change anything that you guys are doing next year in terms of COVID?
I'll speak. This is Lynette. We're not going to modify any of that. I will say, though, that as we looked at some of the pandemic and support of pandemic, you know, we have clearly funded a couple of large medical colleges that are historically Black colleges and universities, as they're trying to assess what happened to Black and Brown people during the pandemic, that we were dying at a higher rate. And so we have supported some of the research and the contact tracing, automated intelligence that they're going to be using, epidemiology, and some of the telehealth to try to understand and provide the research on what occurred. And so as the vaccine comes out and we get a better handle on understanding all of the nuances of this disease or this virus, we will probably still support organizations that are doing some of that research.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, you know, there's some operational things like Nate mentioned. I think a lot of us are eager to be back out close to our communities. I know I am. I also miss being able to visit you all and the folks that we fund. But beyond that, I think the tail on the impact of COVID and our racial reckoning of 2020 is going to be very long. I mean, Marcia, you and I worked together during the foreclosure crisis of 2007, 2008, 10, 11. I mean, we were just starting to come back from that. Black and Brown communities, like, we never fully recovered. This is the next 10 years with generational impacts on kids, on household formations. So I think it's not about any like sharp pivots in what we do, but Lynette, I really liked your framing. You're talking specifically about the health context, but in general, I think we're just going to want to be alongside everybody, continuing to understand what the ongoing ripple effects are for communities and making sure that our dollars meet communities where they are.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and just, Marcia, just picking up on this, look, I hope that some of these vaccines, you know, do progress and work. But I think it's incumbent upon all of us, and I think my peers would agree, that we're going to be in a rebuilding phase for a while now, right? The economic ramifications of this are going to last, you know, longer than some of the health pieces of it. And it's important that we rebuild in an equitable way. If you look historically, there's been, big things. You look at after World War, I look at World War II, and I worked on a lot of clean air standards when I was in President Clinton's shop. And the interstate highway system, which was one of the ways that the US sort of rebuilt after World War II, right? They didn't do it in an equitable way. They built highway systems through poor neighborhoods, right, in cities. Mm-hmm. And it turns out decades later that those same neighborhoods, from a health perspective, asthma rates are through the roof, right, in these Black and brown communities. And we're going to have the ability here to rebuild, in a lot of ways. And I hope that, through the business side as well as our foundation side, that we'll come together and figure out ways to do it in an equitable fashion, equitable way that hasn't been done in the past, and change some of the systemic issues. That's going to take time. That impact doesn't happen overnight. But I do think that's one of the things we're thinking about. And then I think on the business side, you may see some new instruments like social bonds, as an example, that may come into some of these rebuilding efforts, like scaling up, a vaccine if it looks like it works, and making sure it reaches some of the populations that need it most, or otherwise typically are left behind, in these circumstances.
Absolutely. Well, Nate, you guys have really done a great job with the funding that you've provided for COVID, particularly with nonprofits. And Janice, I think you raised this issue. The counseling organizations are seeing a huge uptick in the renters who are just totally distressed and they don't know what to do. And then of course, the home buyers are in pretty decent shape today with the interest rates. But these homeowners, the homeowners are really, well, I won't say suffering, but they are concerned about the forbearances. And so, the help that all of you have provided to help these nonprofit organizations to just sustain the influx of inquiries. And guys, I'm telling you, like, we're the therapists for a whole lot of folks. I mean, well, Janice, you've been on this side of the business. They call and, and I'll just speak very candidly on the homeowner side. When they're calling these servicers, they have people on the line. They can't sit there and hear the stories about what happened to the mama and the daddy and the brother and the sister. And this stuff takes time. And that's what our work is really about, consoling these people, giving them guidance so that they can connect with their mortgage company, so that they can feel good about their life. And also being able to explain to people, look, if you cannot afford the house, it's okay. You can start a new life. The nonprofit segment is struggling. It's struggling, but we have high hopes. And that is why getting the direct information from you guys to lead us so that we are aligning with the kind of impact that you want. We don't just want to be out here, and everybody reads the goes to the website and we see all of that. But sometimes even, the website is you're just not so clear. So our time is almost running out here, guys. But I just want to ask, have you guys thought about anything that you will do or have done around to help with homeowners who are stressed out with the kind of COVID unemployment?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. We have, so I'm really proud of my team. Even before I got here in June, the amount of money that they were able to get out the door quickly. So,
yeah.
175 million that was out the door, by the end of this summer. And that, look, we have risk and things you have to manage right on our side. So to diligently look at those grant applications and work their way through it, I would just say, please, we know the need is desperate out there, and there's a lot of need, and we're getting an influx of ask, and we're moving as fast as we can, to get that money out the door in a responsible way, right? And I think that's been tremendous. We've started to capture some of the numbers. It's over 200,000 people that we've helped keep in homes or in rent through partners, that are on this meeting with you in your organization. And that's something we continue to be vested in. The other thing really quickly that we did was we took all our gross PPP fees that on the business side we collected. Instead of keeping any of that, we donated it back out into the communities through CDFI. So that's over $400 million that we're getting out to small businesses. We just went through our second grant cycle. We have one more when it's all said and done. And we focused right out of the gates, as you guys know, that Latino, Hispanic, Black, small business owners were disproportionately impacted, right, by this downturn. So we've put a lot of the money right out of the gates to those business owners, and are very proud of that.
Great. So we're just about at the end. Lynette, you are our newest foundation leader, and we're so happy to have you. I want to end this with words of wisdom, if you will, from each one of you. Lynette, as you address the hundreds of nonprofit leaders who are on the call, who are on our webinar today, I want you to end this sentence. Nonprofit leaders, the one thing I want you to remember is
continue the fight.
Continue to fight. We're going to do that, and we're going to certainly do that with Truist. Thank you so much. Janis, you want nonprofits to remember.
I'm going to cheat, Marcia, because I want to mention one other thing. I'm going to answer that question. I know we're at time, but let me just say just one other thing for folks on the phone. Think about what our institutions can provide to you beyond funding. Like when I think about where we were sitting in 2007, 2008, the technology is so different. The volume that suddenly hit our doors as intermediaries and as housing counseling organizations was incredible. And we have, between our three organizations, we have technology people, we have marketing people, we have people who will build whole Salesforce systems for you. Think about what beyond just the dollars we might be able to help bolster your organizations during this time. So let me just say that. I want nonprofit leaders to invest in self-care. I'm also a yoga teacher. I highlighted our racial healing work. I think this is an incredibly challenging time for people who are on the front lines, taking care of our community. And I know that you all are doing that while also managing your own trauma, whether that's funerals you could not attend because of COVID, the repeated on-camera visualization of the violence against Black bodies that is just in our face in a new way, but is our constant lived experience. Like these, I know I'm telling you guys things that you know, but you have to take care of yourself. And that's my closing wish for everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Nate, if there were if you were going to give just a word of wisdom to nonprofits, you would say nonprofits, the thing I want you to remember.
One is be true to your mission, which was said earlier, but I think because the needs are so great and the stress is so high, don't stray just to chase funding, be really true to that mission. I think also be very authentic in what you have the capacity to be able to handle. And if you need help in that regard too, be honest about that in your conversations with the grant makers, because we understand, look, there's a lot of need to be met out there. And the last thing we want to do is give resources and then they, really you don't have the capacity to be able to handle that resource. So I think just having that honest dialogue is really, really important, knowing that there are communities and organizations all over this country that need help.
Absolutely. It has been a wonderful pleasure to be with you, Janice, Lynette, Nate. I will say, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much. You all, each one of your companies have sponsored our conference. We're working with you guys in many ways, certainly with our HBCU initiatives. Our nonprofits, thank you so much. And I must say that having you sort of here brings a level of personal realness to our conference. Our next speaker will, in fact, our next two speakers will deal with life. I mean, Janice, you brought up take care of yourself. That is so profound, because if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't take care of others. So I want to make sure that you all take care of yourself. Our next speaker, we're going to have a 5-minute break. Our next speaker is Michael Vick. I happen to see Michael Vick's the 30-30, on ESPN. And I said, I got to find that brother. But I want to say to you guys, I looked at the tape of this last night. Guys, when you see this, I had too much coffee when I interviewed Michael Vick. I just had too much coffee. I was going in too many directions. So you all would have to excuse me. But I just want to say, so from you, we thank you so much for everything you're doing in the community. And we have a few other speakers that's coming on that will just accelerate your realness, your conviction to our nonprofits, but also the people at large. Nate, thank you so much. Lynette, thank you. Janice, thank you. I'm going to be talking to each one of you individually. Look here, guys. You see all these pieces of paper that these people have sent me questions for you all. I couldn't even get to all of the questions, but it's a pleasure to know you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. It was great to be with you.